Any errors or omissions? Hearing none. All in favor? And that is carried. We have no items of correspondence today. We'll go directly to finance. Be it resolved, the accounts payable of $1.641 be approved for payment. Mover?
Henry Siemens.
Seconder?
Karina Bickert.
Any questions regarding those payables? Hearing none. Be it resolved that the general operating and utility financial statements and monthly financial report for, okay, no, this is where it was confusing. This is July 2020.
Yep, that should be August.
Any questions regarding the financials? I see David's not here, but Jody, you want to maybe just
But this is the statement for August, so that's not included. Other than that, no, nothing unusual or different to point out.
utility arrears be added to the property taxes. Mover.
Karina.
Seconder.
Henry Siemens.
Okay, Marvin, you there?
I don't think so. David didn't note anything. I can definitely get that for you.
So we didn't have,
Well, not for this one. We did in April,
Yeah,
but there
Well,
wasn't a
just in the first
significant difference from that item.
Yeah.
okay.
exactly.
Thanks, Marvin. Any other questions? Hearing none. All in favor? And that is carried. Going down to planning,
And this sewer and water.
or sorry, yes, not planning. Be it resolved that water and sewer report for September 2020 be received as information. Mover?
Don,
Did
that dip in there, like in the blue where the production was that due to the, where that spike in there toward the end of the month, was that due to the boil water advisory?
The green line there?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, PBWC helped us build a treatment as well quicker.
Okay.
So we were able to get it back up and run quicker.
I guess the other thing, Scott, you might be able to allude to is I'm still surprised, even in a dry season that we've had, we still have 138% sewage compared to the water production. Like, where does that come from?
Infiltration in, we have a high groundwater level across Winkler.
So it's still groundwater related.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Potential illegal connections for their sump pumps and stuff like that, so it's difficult to control and enforce.
Because you hear these comments every once in a while, people who, whether you're watering the grass or whatever you're doing, you shouldn't pay for the sewage. Well, in this case, you're still producing 38% more sewage than what you produce in water. So even all the stuff that gets used outside of the sewage, this number would be even higher if there was nothing else used outside of your regular water use. So.
Jody, can you scroll
Okay.
down?
Oh, sorry.
Okay, the next item then, be it resolved that council approve subdivision 4463-20-8030. Mover,
Henry Siemens.
seconder.
Andrew.
Any comments or questions regarding that subdivision approval? We have all the documents attached. Development agreement, conditional approval of the province. Any other questions regarding that one? Hearing
All-
none, sorry. Go ahead.
All of the conditions that are there have been agreed to by the developer.
Thanks, Stephanie, and thanks, Henry. All right, all in favor? And that is carried. Next one, be it resolved that bylaw number 2258-20 be given first reading. Mover?
Michael,
Michael, and seconder.
Don?
Thank you. Scott, do you want to explain that one a little bit? I realize it's down by Clover Creek. Is that for the road, I think? Okay.
Referring to bylaw 25A?
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
So there's an unexpected delay. We were originally advised by our land surveyor that this expropriation method does not require a works opening bylaw and only a works opening bylaw. Long story short, there was a bit of a dispute between land titles and the land surveyor as far as the registration requirements, and that just delayed things significantly. Now we finally sought clarification from both our lawyer and land titles, and the passing of this works bylaw will finally allow us to complete the Clover Creek subdivision.
Okay.
So,
Okay. Thanks for clarification. Any other questions of council? Hearing none, all in favor? And that is carried. Seconder,
Green.
any questions? Just skip down to the bottom. And we have a letter that we received recommendation from AMM in light of Bill 48, that we make one last ditch effort as a province as a whole to try and have some input in regards to dealing with Bill 48. And this letter simply states our opinion. Maybe we should do this. Just have a motion from one member of council and a seconder to forward this letter.
I so move.
Marvin moved, seconder.
I'll second.
Michael, thank you. And all in favor of sending
Okay,
this?
just a small editorial on the first one. I'm ready to restate our municipality's objection. Should that be apostrophe S instead of spell?
Okay, yeah. Thanks, teacher. Appreciate it.
Not quite dead yet.
It's all good. Yeah. We can maybe scrutinize it for punctuation, but good point. All right, all in favor? And that is carried. Okay, then we'll go back.
Don?
Seconder.
Andrew?
And all in favor? And that is carried. Jody, public hearing number V 1623-20 regarding 284 9th Street.
Do you want to wait a few minutes or,
Oh dear. 1 minute to go.
Wendy.
well,
2 minutes.
Two.
Wendy.
maybe while we just wait a little bit, I'll just say something briefly about the public hearings. If you do want to speak, we are streaming these meetings on YouTube and making them available for people and for other media. So if you do have something to say, we're going to ask that you step up to the microphone and give us your name, and then you can speak and address the chair, just so that everyone will be able to hear through the recording.
Okay, it's all good?
We'll proceed.
I think we proceed.
Okay. So this is variation application number 1623-20. The owners are Jeff and Valerie Hildebrandt. The location is 284 9th Street. And the request is to correct an existing non-conforming building as identified by a building location certificate. So the variation that's required is for a 2.5 interior yard setback, where the 5 yard is the zoning requirement, and a 16-foot front yard where the requirement is 25 foot. And our office has not received any written objections to this application.
Can you tell us how far back this situation is? Has it been there for 20 years or 40 years, or it's not recent though? How far back it goes, I'm not sure, Stephanie, if you know that.
2011.
Oh, yeah.
was when the building permit was taken.
So was there not a land certificate or a building location certificate required then?
No.
Nope.
No, the building location certificate was issued in July of this year.
Okay. Okay. Nobody here representing Jeff Hildebrand's? Any questions of council? Any concerns? Any recommendation from staff?
The staff recommendation was that if there were no objections, that it be approved with no conditions.
Okay. And we haven't heard of any objections, you said?
Correct.
Okay. All right, then we'll move on. Be it resolved, this public hearing for variation 1623-20 be closed. Mover,
Marvin?
seconder,
Andrew?
all in favor? And that is carried. Therefore, be it resolved that council approve variation number 1623-20. Mover,
Henry Siemens?
seconder,
Karina?
Dawn?
Yeah, Dawn can have it.
okay. Don, thank you. Any last comments, questions? Hearing none, all in favor? And that is carried.
Okay. So we'll move on to variation application 1614-20. Applicant is David Cron on behalf of 618-6433 Manitoba Limited. Location is 735 Roblin Boulevard East. And the reason for this variation is to correct the location of an existing non-conforming HVAC and mechanical equipment. And so we have our zoning bylaw requirements that architectural features may project 5 feet into any yard, provided that said features project no closer than 2 feet to any side sight line. So the request here is to allow HVAC and mechanical equipment to project 12.24 feet and 7.28 feet into the required rear and side yards. So we also have not received any objections to this variation application.
So when this building was built, correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought there was some conversation in regards to that. And were they not going to be putting a fence around it, or do I not recall that one correctly?
I think there was, yeah, we were talking about having them put a fence around
Right.
there.
Is that still a requirement, or would it be a recommendation?
I don't know that we had that in this one. There was another building a while back where we had the same type of variation request that we approved. Stephanie, do you remember if there was a fence requirement? I don't recall one, but
I think we just talked, must have just talked about it at the planning meeting.
This is the building they've acquired more recently. This is not their main
Oh,
building.
that's not the existing
Oh,
one?
This is
okay.
not their main building. The main building, I believe, was where the discussion
Right.
happened.
Oh, okay.
This, they've bought more recently. So I
Okay.
don't know that there's anything here
Okay.
in that one.
Well, maybe we could recommend the same thing.
Could be.
Not an
Where they
obligation,
built
I
on.
realize it.
They built
I'm
onto
okay
that
with the
existing
recommendation.
building.
Okay, so maybe just a point, Stephanie, is just simply we would recommend rather than require a fence around the equipment,
Like a 6-foot fence or just a high?
just to hide it, whatever.
There are fences around the other one?
No, I don't think they have
I
a
don't
fence
think
around
we-
their
I
other one.
thought,
I don't think we required it on that one.
I do
I would
know
have to
that
check.
That one was a discussion at that
Right.
time. And it may also have been a recommendation.
Okay.
well, anyway, it's not a requirement, but if they would consider that, maybe even for both of them, wouldn't be a bad idea. All right,
Past that, though, I don't see any concern with this one.
okay. Okay, if there's nothing else, be it resolved, public hearing for variation 161420 be closed. Mover? Marvin? Seconder?
Andrew?
Okay, Andrew, we got yours first. All in favor? And that is carried. Next item, be it resolved that council approve variation number 1614-20. Mover?
Henry Siemens,
Seconder?
Don?
All in favor? And that is carried. Okay, Jody, the next one?
So this is a conditional use application, 1621-20. Applicant is Tamarack Builders on behalf of owner.
I'd like to declare an interest.
Okay,
Accepted? Thanks, Andrew.
Lands Parkway. And this is, the request is to construct 10 12-unit apartment buildings on site as a planned unit development. And that is a conditional use development. We've not received any written objections to this application.
Okay, is there anybody here who wants to voice an opinion? Okay, could you please get up to the mic and state your name? Sure, you can take it off.
Going to be a little bit muffled otherwise. My name is Raymond Rivard. I own the property right beside that property that's going to be redeveloped, or a new proposal for it. So I have some concerns that I had mentioned to Stephanie that I was going to come and bring up some of the concerns I have.
Okay,
absolutely.
please feel free.
Okay, continue, yeah.
Yes, please do.
Okay. I received in the mail on Monday, October 5th, of this notice of a public hearing for 44 Northlands Parkway, which I believe was like a block or two away from my property because I'm at 305. So, but after thinking about it, I called the city here and I found out it's right next door to my property. In fact, there's a lot of issues between the two properties. So last Wednesday, I reached out to Al to meet me at the property to go over their new proposal. John and Richard also came to the meeting. So after reviewing the new plan, and much to my surprise, I found that all the services are in or crossing that property. These services were installed to accommodate the original plan of the whole area, which was 4 apartment building plan. There was hundreds of thousands of dollars spent to install these services, and now with this new proposal, there's hundreds of thousands of dollars to be spent again to relocate them. There's hydro, MTS, the water, the sewage, the storm drain, and some parking stalls. I believe this proposal should be put on pause so we can explore all options and costs. The two properties have to work together to no services are lost, or they can work together. And then finally, we need some type of agreement or an understanding who will bear all these costs. So those are the issues that I bring forward to the council here.
Thank you very much. Any questions of council?
I guess a quick one is exactly that, Mr. Mayor. In terms of moving services, what does that look like, and where does the responsibility for that lie? for that lie?
I guess I will ask for clarification from Scott, who's the engineer, but, or the developers can respond to that as well.
In terms of our understanding, we're not aware of any cross-access agreements for servicing or any conditions that were put on them when that was originally constructed and subdivided. To be perfectly honest, I'm not 100% certain on where that lies because it's likely in a private agreement somewhere.
So normally it would be incumbent upon him as a property owner to bear those costs, or we can hardly figure that one to be? Or maybe you guys want to explain that one after, but,
It would depend on the conditions of sale.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
I thought I had bought phase one of a multi-phase plan for the whole property.
okay. Okay,
Is there any more to?
okay, that's good for now.
Okay.
We'll allow the developer to maybe clarify or fill us in on the gaps.
Okay,
John?
yes, the property was sold to
State
a
your-
development
state your
company.
name first to make
Oh,
sure.
John Fraze,
Yeah, thanks.
with 211-7983. To developer for that purpose of a department. They built that. Things went wrong for them and they ended up losing it. And so this property came up for sale. And I think Mr. Rivard was the owner or the purchaser of the property at that time.
Right.
Normally, when I go and purchase a property, maybe, I think Michael will know this too, in a offer to purchase, usually you put in due diligence period, which gives you time to go and check out the property, where things are at, what the services are at. You check out the whole property, right? And so I'm sorry, Mr. Rivard, that maybe you weren't aware of it at that time, right? That all these things were there. And for us, when I looked at where the property line was, we knew it was right at the boundary where the curbing was, but part of the parking, when we checked later, the parking was all on our property as well. We met with Raymond on site. I had our surveyor, Paul Eckenwright, survey the property, our portion. He surveyed where all the hydro was, where the storage unit is, the parking, put that all on a map. So when we met with Mr. Bard, we showed him where everything was so that he didn't have to go and have the expense of figuring out where everything was. And then we let him know some of the options that were there. Richard had already checked everything out with hydro and where that could be moved instead of the water and the storm drainage. It does cross our property. It will cross exactly where the building is, so it's not an option for us to leave it there. Yeah, so it's not an option to do that, which I'm sorry, but that won't work for him. So that'll have to be changed. We did mention to him some ideas of how that could work, but obviously we'll have to also go through Scott and Dwayne as to how those services can be moved and reconnected. So I don't know if there's other questions.
Well, his question was in regards to the cost of doing this. Are you suggesting part of that would be his cost, or?
I don't see why it's ours. We didn't put it on there. We were not the ones that put the services where they are. So I'm not thinking that, we gave him estimates of what we thought it would cost. So he has an idea now of what relocating everything would be. We had the electrician there and checking that all out so we could let him know.
One further question, Mr. Mayor,
Yep,
if you would.
two.
In terms of that lot and the services that went across, was the entire lot owned by the developer at that time? Or did he?
No,
have
we owned the property. We sold him the land for the first unit.
Okay.
That was all. That was the only deal that was there that was finalized.
So there was a cross-access agreement then for those services?
No.
So
No agreements were in place.
there was obviously an expectation, though, that they would service that property somehow, correct?
If they would continue to purchase the rest of it, then I guess that would have worked out for them, the way they put it in.
So that's
But-
why it was designed, that's what I'm getting at. That's why it was designed that way. So you have an existing building, services in place, and like you said, that.
They were assuming
there'd
that
be
they would
another
be
building
buying
built.
it,
Yeah,
but there was no deal in place that they would, for that
okay.
assumption to be made.
So basically, in good faith, you let them build across your land.
I didn't even know that it was put that way.
Okay.
To tell you the truth, I didn't know any of the servicing was there till we looked at, and we checked where our property line was. So when they originally put that all in, I was not aware that it was on our property.
Okay. Okay, Alan?
Just make a comment. It was like 5, 6 years ago when you purchased from the bank in bankruptcy. I did make you aware that the parking lot was on our land. I didn't know that the deep services were, but that's when they put the pegs in. And I called him and I actually offered if he wanted to buy it. And 3 years ago, I wasn't sure exactly how long, but made the offer, but there was no response. So obviously we want to plan for the development. We also did offer the first 3 buildings, phase 1, and also the 3 buildings of phase 2, which would be in a year's time, would not affect this at all at this point. Only when we do phase 3, the 4 buildings up against his property, which would be like 2-3 years down the road, then it would affect his property. And we offered it to him when we met that we were willing to forego, we give him 2 years to change the services back onto his property. So, but yeah, the property was not,
Okay.
the people wanted to buy it from Steinbach, but they went to bankruptcy and,
Okay.
yeah, we did not know.
Okay.
The people wanted to buy it from Steinbach, but they went to bankruptcy and,
Okay.
yeah, we did not know the services were there.
Okay, thank you, Alan.
Just for crystal clear clarity, the first phase and the second phase are not affected at all by the service concern that's here.
That's right. It's only phase 3, and that's why we offered 2 years. And we would also give him easements across our property so he could move his services.
Okay.
So we did that in good faith and trying to be a good neighbor.
Okay, thank
Okay,
you.
Thank you. Any further comments, sir? Okay, please.
It was only last week that I found out that the services were where they were. The other thing too, they were asking about variances to front in a side yard or rear yard. And I do believe because where they're placing their buildings, it's affecting some of these services that have to be rerouted. I'm not sure, what affects what.
So you need some clarification or some time to work through this and,
Well, I have to, like I said, I just found out just a week ago about these issues. And to do it during COVID and everything else
Yeah.
Is unrealistic to have a plan within a week in the best of times.
okay, thank you. So I think did you want to comment something up and then we'll,
I know for him, the time frame that he's got 2 years, he can work with it, he can spread the cost out over 2 years if it is too much, right? So we're trying to do as much as we could that way.
okay, and, sorry.
Richard Dick. Even if we do not get the variation for the front yard, the LDS wastewater sewer line would still be under an existing building with no variation on the building setback.
Okay, so some work has to be done regardless.
Yeah, it has to be done even with no variations taken out on the front yard.
Okay. But the deferral of that would still be 2 years, right? Till
Yeah, and that's why we've offered 2 years to work on this. Obviously, there's a need for housing in the community, and we'd like to get going on the first 3 buildings. And because winter is coming, we need to act sooner rather than later. But I mean, we did offer this for 2 years. I mean, we are also offering easements across our property that,
Yeah.
I guess if he doesn't want to play ball with us, then he'll maybe have to dig up some more of his own property for his services, so.
We don't want to be in a situation where we start giving ultimatums because then the pressure gets a little bit too heavy. So stick with your offer for the first one for deferring it for two years. But I think in light of the circumstance, Scott, were you going
Can I
to?
before you close it?
Okay, please.
Just
Based on the preliminary servicing plan here, not all services could be delayed for 2 years. The sewer service would be required to be modified because the proposed layout, if approved in the way that it's shown here, would ultimately result in the existing service conflicting with the new sewer line. So that would be required to be done now. And so just to clarify that not all could be deferred if this plan is approved the way it is. So, yep.
Hey, Richard?
I did talk to Nathan Giesbrecht about it already, about changing our sewer line coming in from off of Northlands, not crossing over his sewer line. Otherwise, we'd actually cross over his sewer line or under or whatever. It would be coming off of Northlands and then servicing 3 lines coming off. So phase 3 would still only be in 2 years.
Well, maybe for clarification, get everybody back on the same page, maybe instead of closing this public hearing, we should just defer. Because then we'll need a couple of weeks. I mean, this is very, very rushed. We as council weren't even aware of this until a week ago.
I guess that will probably delay the project till next year. That's just timing right now. As I said, phase 1 with a small change on the sewer line, nothing would get affected on his part. And that would allow us to proceed with some more housing.
So can you reach an agreement with your neighbor in the next day?
Well, we hope so.
Because until you reach that agreement, we can't do anything. Like it's some major infrastructure moves that need to be taking place. Haven't been involved in the subdivision originally, or the placement of the building, or the new concept, because the proposal was for another 50-unit apartment block, right? Which is what he was expecting when you bought the other apartment block, right? So.
But usually it's upon the buyer, beware, right? I mean, if you're buying it
Yeah,
for bankruptcy,
yeah.
and I know it at the
But we're
time.
better people than that.
Yeah, well, no, I'm just saying
I think what I see here, certainly it's incumbent on Mr. Rivard to do his due diligence and make sure that he understands where he's building, or what he's buying in this situation, to be made aware of several years ago that the parking lot was an issue. I'm not sure what discussions have or have not happened during that time. But if my parking lot was on somebody else's property, I'd certainly try to rectify that in some way, shape, or form, or at least bring an agreement to dive into. And if in fact the two can come to a quick agreement, I don't see a reason that this couldn't or shouldn't happen. We were aware of and prepared for significant density in that spot. We believed it made sense based on where it was, and we supported it at that time. Some of the bigger questions about service and how that happens, the fact that we're hearing about here, I recognize that you're moving very fast, and I can appreciate that. But we do want to make sure that our staff has an opportunity to review that and to comment on it, because our staff, Scott and his team, are the pros that give us the direction we need to make sound decisions. So how we move that in the next short period of time, I don't know exactly how that looks. The agreement, I would sure love to see you guys come back here with the services underneath. You were aware of the issue up top, and the fact that that hasn't been addressed concerns me.
Come to an agreement. And in combination with the city engineering department. So it's completed.
That was going to be something I would suggest. If you approve it, subject to that we reach an agreement on is it the wastewater line? Is that what you're talking?
Well, just whatever the issues are that you've got outstanding, whether it's parking or wastewater or water or hydro or whatever the case may be.
Mhm.
The answers need to be there for both parties involved. You for your protection when you're building a new one, so make sure you put it in the right place. And that would obviously involve Scott and his department as well. And for your protection, so that you're not held ransom at some point down the road and say, well, no, this is all your problem. Like we need to fix it. If we can't fix it here today, we need to fix it this week so that you can start building, because conceptually, we agree this is a good thing.
Okay, so you're going to give us 10 minutes to go and meet outside and come back?
Well, as long as you don't take boxing gloves with you.
Well, maybe you can come and be a referee.
I need help by myself.
Oh, yeah. There's Scott or Dwayne. They can probably help mediate for you. Okay. Okay, then we will just simply maybe move on to the recess, this one. You guys, if you're,
Issue, there's a lot of cost involved. And what are the costs gonna be? You don't
Right.
know those numbers. You can't agree to something, you don't know what the number is. And who's responsible for what?
well, maybe that can be sorted out.
Well, maybe.
I think
The other part, though, if Mr. Bard says this has to be worked, and maybe it can't, are we then being held hostage till who knows when,
Well,
till
both-
he makes an agreement before we can get a variation approved?
That's why we'd like to get this thing straightened out.
Because technically then I would say that his services are on our property. It's his responsibility to take them off unless he wants to come to an agreement.
Can I excuse you guys, have that discussion? Scott, if you can go out, and Dwayne, if you want to get involved. Have that discussion. We'll go on to the other ones. You don't want to?
Well, to make a 5-minute decision on an item like this, I wouldn't recommend it.
Okay.
You can do it, but I wouldn't recommend it.
would it,
It's an item that warrants discussion, and proper discussion, and not trying to rush the decision.
so the other option may be to go back to what you said earlier, is to approve it subject to a three-way agreement on encroachment.
Right.
If that agreement doesn't happen, then the conditional use isn't approved.
Right. They thought maybe they could resolve it tonight, but
I think for our staff too, in a short discussion, it would be hard for us to do any checking that we might need to do. I agree with Scott that it would be a difficult position to do that in a 5 or 10-minute conversation.
John?
Like, do any of the variations really encroach on their services?
I'm not sure on the layout.
Because we're
That's
talking about a
Scott
variation hearing here, right?
We're only on conditional use right now.
Yeah, right now
Yeah.
we're doing conditional use.
Okay.
You said the variations weren't really applicable until phase 3, right? Or
Well, the variations are applicable all the way through.
all the
but
way through?
They don't affect even the concern that Mr. Rivard expressed with regard to the buildings being on top of the services. Whether or not the variations are granted, the buildings will be on top of the services. So it has to be addressed
Right.
either way. The
But
concern,
you would think that our engineering department needs to address that as much as anybody.
well, the sewage piece
Right.
that we're made aware of today, that's going to be something that has to be discussed and addressed. I don't have a problem making a motion that we support this, that we approve this based on a three-way agreement between our department, Mr. Rivard, and the proponent. But I also believe that if and I'm not making a motion now, I'm speaking to where I'm heading. I also believe that phase 1 and 2, Rivard, to get together and come to a place, you're going to be neighbors for a long time. This has to be done. And you're in a position, ultimately, through no fault of your own, you bought a property and ended up with your services and your ability to do it on somebody else's property. Somehow, that has to be rectified. Either
Yeah.
today or tomorrow, it has to be rectified. Whether or not it was something that you were aware of, ultimately, to a degree, it's going to be your responsibility. whether or not you can get some cost sharing from your neighbor. There's going to be a piece of that. But the fact that you've got the property and it's been there for 3 years, and I have no idea, neither one of you has told me how many times you've met to try to resolve the fact that your parking lot is on your neighbor's yard. I don't know, maybe you've met every week and you haven't been able to get it done, I don't know.
No, we've only met once, and I offered that he could buy it, but he's never gotten back to me, and so I left it. And so we had to move on, it's our property, and that's why we designed these apartments. And so what can you do? 3 years.
Okay. Well, obviously, we don't have 3 years to resolve this. So I think I would entertain, first of all, we close this public hearing. I think we've heard all sides. We know what the issues are. And then move on to the approval. And that's where some of those conditions would be in that approval process. So for now, be it resolved that the public hearing for the conditional use 1621-20 be closed. Mover?
Marvin?
Michael and Marvin, thank you. All in favor? That is carried. All right,
Oh, not yet.
Not yet.
okay, so going on to the next one, then be it resolved that council approve conditional use number 1621-20, subject to a development agreement, and we need to add something in there to clarify, and Scott, maybe you can help us out to what wording you want in there. That the neighboring parties reach a mutual agreement for servicing or something to that effect. That's okay? So we're approving it, subject to the two neighboring parties come to a favorable solution for services.
Were we calling that three-way, including the
And-
city?
Yes.
And that our staff's concerns with regard to sewage be addressed. Or services.
Well, services, it's a three-way agreement that needs to take place. Terms and conditions of the development agreement will be in accordance with the recommendations made in the city's report to council. So I'm assuming that you guys have seen the conditions of the development agreement. So that's the only change in the wording here then. Is that okay by council? All right, so then we will entertain a motion.
To reiterate here is that the two get together and figure it out. Figure it out in a fair way to both, but that neither one would unduly hold back getting to an agreement. Because it makes more, there's an issue here. Mr. Rivard, it wasn't through your fault that you ended up here. You made an investment into our community, and we thank you for that. Unfortunately, under the hood was an engine that wasn't working quite the way you anticipated. Somehow that has to be figured out. And I would ask the proponents to work together with them to come up with something that makes sense, that can happen so that we can move forward and have two neighbors understanding and getting along and feel that they were both being treated fairly.
And I think on both sides, you need to understand what is in the past is simply something that needs to be dealt with, rather than blaming one party or the other party for where you're going. Just resolve it between you and Scott and make sure it's working. Because again, we appreciate the investment, we appreciate the development that is being proposed here. We have no issues with that whatsoever, but we need to make sure that the neighbors are still carried unanimously. So guys, work it out. Sooner the better. The sooner you get it worked out, the sooner you can start. So it's to everybody's best interest. Okay, thank you. You can call Andrew back in.
Actually,
You wanna do the
go
variation
with-
Oh, sorry, variation. Yes, sorry, yes.
So we have variation application 162220, same applicant Tamarack on behalf of owner 2117983 Manitoba. And this is in order to construct again the 4 of the 10 12-unit apartment buildings on site with a preferred building layout, a front yard and 20-foot rear yard setback. Once again, we have not received any written objections to this application.
So I guess first question I would ask from our staff, is there any concerns in regards to those changes? Concerns in regards to those changes? Stephanie, thanks.
So the encroachments aside, the 10-foot front yard setback, originally the application was proposed with 15 feet on the north and south. And in order to provide the Red Hawk residents to the north with a bit more of a additional buffer space, their backyards are actually approved at 20 feet. So it's a bit less deep than your traditional 25-foot backyard already.
Okay. So no serious objections to that, just clarification.
Something there that I think turned out to be a better end result. So thank you.
All right, if there's no more questions, be it resolved this public. And any last words? Hearing none, all in favor? And that is carried. Going on, be it resolved that council approve the variation 1622-20, subject to a development agreement. Terms and condition of the development agreement will be in accordance with recommendations made to city's report to council.
Henry Siemens.
Seconder.
Marvin.
I'll ask just one question of Scott. Obviously, the proponents have reviewed this report as well and are aware of what's in it to us. Okay.
All right. Hearing no other objections, all in favor? And that is carried. All right. Now we'll call our friend Andrew back in.
No,
if you
we
will.
don't.
One more.
Oh, one more.
Yep.
Oh, man.
Keep sitting
Are
on
you
me.
buying the whole town? Okay.
So we have one more variation application, 162520, same applicant and owners, same address. And this is in order to construct 2 driveway accesses that meet minimum fire access requirements. Zoning bylaw requirements 12-meter driveway width. Variation requested to have 2 25-meter wide driveway accesses. And here too, we've not received any written objections to this application.
Any comments from staff? No objections there?
Just clarification, a little bit of a conflict between the building code and fire access requirements. So essentially the reason for the variation is
All right. Therefore, be it resolved, the public hearing for variation 162520 be closed. Mover?
Marvin.
Karina and Marvin, thank you. All in favor? And that is carried. Be it resolved that council approve variation number 162520, subject to development agreement. Terms and conditions of the development agreement will be in accordance with the recommendations made in the city's report to council. Mover?
Henry Siemens.
Seconder?
Dawn?
Any last minute questions? Hearing none, all in favor? And that is carried. Okay, now we can get
Now
Andrew
Andrew
back.
can come back.
Okay, the next public hearing is for Harvest Bay.
Variation application 1626-20. Applicant is Kevin Brown, owners Kevin and Jody Brown. Address is 8 Harvest Bay. The reason for the request is in order to construct a pergola-style structure in the backyard. Zoning bylaw requirements are for 5-foot interior and rear yard setbacks. Variation requested is for 2 3/4 foot interior and rear yard setbacks. We've not received any objections to this applications.
Okay, any questions?
The neighbors to the north there have been notified of the proposal and they don't have any objections. They also recently applied for were approved for a building as well.
Okay. All right, therefore be it resolved, this public hearing for variation V 1626-20.
Dawn?
All in favor? And that is carried.
Construct a pergola-style structure. This is for the building separation distance. The requirement is 10 feet. The variation requested is 7-foot separation distance. No objections.
All right, any questions of council? Okay, therefore be it resolved, this public hearing for V 1627-20 be closed. Mover?
Michael?
Seconder?
Mervin.
All in favor? That is carried. Therefore be it resolved, council approve variation 1627-20. Mover?
Henry Siemens?
Seconder?
Don?
All in favor? That is carried. Be it resolved that public hearings be adjourned and regular council reconvene. Mover?
Andrew?
Seconder?
Mervin.
All in favor?
See Kevin?
See, Kev?
Thank
Okay,
you.
Kevin. And that is carried. Questions for the media, but if you have any, we can chat later. Okay. Therefore be it resolved, this regular meeting of council, adios. 7:30, Henry, you can watch your movie with
Pretty
your kids.
good.
Look at that.
Pretty good.